Spider-Man does whatever Spider-Man can, and he does it better than most other Spider-Man can. Spider-Man Far From Home is one of the best Spider-Man films ever, and it's the second Spider-Man film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I'm Adamic, here to tell you all about it. But first, hit that little subscribe button and check ADAMICradio.com for more reviews, interviews, and other stuff. And now, Spider-Man Far From Home. Spider-Man, Peter Parker, is going on a school trip to Europe. He's pretty excited because he finally has a plan to win over MJ, the girl of his dreams. But there happens to be some crazy monsters showing up all over Europe, so Nick Fury recruits Spider-Man to help out. Kind of ruins his vacation. The other big Spider-Man character in this film is Mysterio, played by Jake Gyllenhaal. They did a really good job handling Mysterio. In the comics, he's typically an illusionist or magician. Occasionally, he has actual powers. Far From Home does a great job taking the concept of Mysterio and updating it to make it feel modern and fairly plausible, like it could actually happen. The film also does a really good job of showing Peter struggling to have a personal life and to be Spider-Man. Keeps trying to go off and be a teenager and do high school stuff, then keeps having to be responsible and be Spider-Man. It's a lot of fun seeing him struggle with it. There's a lot of lighthearted, funny moments, but at the same time, the film also deals with the fallout from Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame. Now, if you haven't seen those films, why not? Like, Endgame's the second highest grossing film of all time. Everybody's seen it. Peter's pretty upset about Tony Stark's death, and that plays throughout the film. Essentially, in this version, Spider-Man's Uncle Ben's kind of been replaced by Tony Stark. In the Sam Raimi films in the early 2000s with Tobey Maguire, Peter was always wondering if he'd be able to make his Uncle Ben proud. In this film, it's all about living up to Tony Stark's legacy. It's nice to see that interconnectedness of the MCU, although it's a little weird that Uncle Ben doesn't seem to matter that much anymore. The film does have some fun with the Infinity War snap where they turn to dust, and then everybody coming back 5 years later in Endgame. They now call coming back the blink because everybody came back in the blink of an eye. They have a couple fun stories about the blink, like how in the middle of a basketball game, half the marching band from 5 years earlier suddenly appears on the court. Some of the students at Peter's school are now 5 years behind other students, including Peter, because, well, he was one of them that got dusted. Overall, Spider-Man Far From Home is a much lighter and funnier film than Endgame, which makes it a good palate cleanser after something like Endgame that had such dark and sad stuff going on. Now, the after credits for Far From Home, they're really smart, because the scene leaves Marvel some wiggle room to do things depending on how the Sony deal works out. Remember, Sony used to make the Spider-Man films. They bought the film rights to Spider-Man back in the 90s when Marvel was struggling. Sony is one of the few companies to still have rights to any Marvel characters. Marvel's gotten most of their characters back, but not Spider-Man. Sony made the Tobey Maguire films, as well as the Andrew Garfield ones, which were kind of And a couple of years ago, Marvel made a deal with Sony to use Spider-Man. That was a 5-movie deal. Captain America Civil War, Spider-Man Homecoming, Avengers Infinity War, Avengers Endgame, and now Spider-Man Far From Home. That's the 5 movies. So the next Spider-Man movie might not be a Marvel movie. Sony's been working on their own Spider-Man universe, making films with Spider-Man supporting characters, but not Spider-Man himself so far. Sony made the Venom movie, which was not connected to the MCU and really wasn't that good. Sony also is working on a Black Cat Silver Sable team-up movie that might get split into 2 solo movies. They're also working on a movie based on Morbius the Vampire and a sequel to Venom. So there's a chance that now that Marvel has cleaned up Spider-Man and made him more popular than ever, Sony could take the character back and try to do the next movie on their own, or they could sign another deal with Marvel and let them keep making films. The after credits of Spider-Man Far From Home leaves things open enough that if Marvel gets to make another movie, they get a story already built in. But if they don't get to use the character again, it also gives Marvel a good excuse for why Spider-Man isn't around anymore. So it's a pretty genius ending. Spider-Man Far From Home, good movie. Definitely one of the best Spider-Man films ever. This one probably does the best job of showing Spider-Man trying to balance his high school life and his superhero life. It's also probably the funniest Spider-Man movie ever. The first Sam Raimi Spider-Man movie with Tobey Maguire, though, still feels a little bit more like Spider-Man, just because it was just Spider-Man swinging from webs in New York, while this one shows Spider-Man in Europe and going through a few costumes and using some Iron Man tech and dealing with the Infinity War fallout. So while that stuff's cool, it does take the focus a little bit off of Spider-Man, but this is probably the second best Spider-Man movie ever made. 4 out of 5 stars. That's going to do it for Spider-Man Far From Home. Tell me in the comments what you think of the film and whether Spider-Man should stay in the MCU or Sony should take him back and put him in a movie with their Venom. Like, share, subscribe, all that. I'm Adamic. I'll see you later. Bye-bye.